We're in Salem at the Oregon State Fair in the Hart Garden, enjoying this beautiful day. Thanks for joining us on Comcast Newsmakers. You know, more than 1 in 5 people living with HIV don't even know they have it. For more on this, we turn to Michael Kaplan, who's the Executive Director of Cascade AIDS Project. Michael, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Talk to me a little bit about people even getting tested. I mean, we don't see it among the heterosexual community as much as we do among the gay community.
And certainly there are more people living today with HIV than any other time in our history. We've had this epidemic for 30 years now. Today in the U.S., 1.1 million Americans are living with HIV. Historically, we thought about this as the gay disease. I, as a gay man, certainly have been impacted and have been living with HIV for 17 years. But the reality is infection rates have actually been increasing among heterosexual populations, that anyone who's partaking in sexual risk behavior can be at risk of being infected. And unfortunately, heterosexual are much less likely to get tested for the disease.
Do you think the stigma is that it is still a gay disease?
I think the stigma has part to do with that. I mean, I think we've had greater acceptance overall of gay and lesbian people, but certainly that's a part of it. I think, you know, HIV continues to impact some of the most marginalized populations. So I told you half of infections in the US are among gay bisexual men. Well, half, and that's an overlapping half, are also among African Americans. So communities who've struggled with racism, homophobia, those who've struggled with substance abuse are some of the most impacted people, and it's difficult to deal with that stigma related to all that.
With treatments, we are dealing with folks, more and more people infected than ever before, and that's not going to go down anytime soon. What problems does this pose to people, to the medical community?
Well, treatments are tremendously expensive. I have the privilege of a good job and I'm covered with insurance. My meds are about $2,000 a month.
A month?
Yeah. And so when you think about the fact that we have 1.1 million Americans living with HIV, there's a lot of need around medicine and treatment. And in fact, with the current economic challenges, as more and more people are struggling with unemployment and health insurance, there are currently 2,500 Americans who are on waiting lists just to get access to treatment.
We've heard about HIV and AIDS in the late 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s. We don't hear so much about it today.
Yeah, I think a lot of the attention was turned away. About 5 years ago, a lot of the attention around HIV and AIDS was turned to Africa, and rightly. I mean, when there are 33 million people around the globe living with HIV, and the vast majority, more than 3/4, are on the continent of Africa, we turned a lot of attention there. What we did during that time is lost focus in the U.S., and people didn't realize that in our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., 1 in 20 adults are living with HIV. In fact, we have higher HIV infection rates in Washington, D.C. than in all the Western African countries.
How about Portland? Or not Portland,
Oregon. Oregon has about 7,000 people statewide living with HIV. We have a slightly lower rate than general across the nation, certainly lower than our nation's capital, but it is present, and infection rates continue at about 300 new infections each year in Oregon.
When does HIV become AIDS?
So HIV is the virus. AIDS is a clinical definition that the virus has moved to a certain place, meaning I am a person living with HIV. If my T cell count, which is an indicator of my immune system, drops below 200, or if I present with 2 opportunistic infections, I would then be clinically defined as also having AIDS.
Michael, Cascade AIDS Walk Portland is coming up. Tell me about it.
So on October 3rd, AIDS Walk Portland will take place. It's the single largest gathering of people in Oregon and Southwest Washington to raise both awareness and funds related to HIV and AIDS. We expect over 10,000 people showing up in Pioneer Square, and it's a great way to just show that you care, raise awareness, and an easy thing to get involved with. All people need to do is go to aidswalkportland.org.
All right, and we'll put that also on the screen as well. Thank you very much for joining us, Michael Kaplan, who is the Executive Director of the Cascade AIDS Project. We appreciate you joining us, and thank you for joining us as well. I'm Ken Ackerman. You're watching Comcast Newsmakers.